The power structure of the USA has changed, maybe forever. And the combination of the pandemic, the election, and the riot at the Capitol have all combined to cement that change. Maybe it will lead us all to a great reset and a totalitarian government. Back in the days of Joseph and Pharaoh, a famine in Egypt led to very similar changes. The parallels between what is going on now in our world and what may follow, of course, during the rest of this year seem almost uncanny with that time. For those who say the Great Reset isn't found in Scripture, I invite you to watch what Joseph and Pharaoh orchestrated nearly 4,000 years ago. That's what we're talking about today, and we're starting right now. Back in the time of Joseph, he and Pharaoh were able to completely transform the nation of Egypt by using economic turmoil caused by the famine as a lever. They started by eliminating Pharaoh's political rivals and then consolidating power. They acquired all the business interests, the personal property, and turned the people of the nation into slaves. And they did some things that you probably aren't even aware of. Isn't that an almost perfect recipe for what the New World Order of global elites is trying to do with the Great Reset, using the pandemic this time as the lever? There is nothing new under the sun. So, when this video is done, let us know. Are these similarities prophetic or just a coincidence? Let's start with the Great Reset. Most of you know the Great Reset is not a conspiracy theory. Rather, it's the strategy of the global elites that is clear and right out in the open. Klaus Schwab, founder of the World Economic Summit, has this to say: the pandemic represents a rare but narrow window of opportunity to reflect, reimagine, and reset our world. Such gentle wording for a plan to acquire all the world's assets and turn its people into slaves of a totalitarian state. Now, Justin Trudeau, not surprisingly, loves the plan, whose slogan is Build Back Better. Hey, wait a minute. That's the same slogan as the Biden campaign. Yes, it is. Why do you think he won the USA election? Answer: to help accomplish the Great Reset. Now, in this previous video, we discussed the outline of the steps of the New World Order, the ones they envision, and the timetable for their supposed plan. Click in the upper right of the screen if you haven't seen this popular video yet. But today, we're going to focus on the Great Reset of 1800 BC, and a shout goes out to community member Dan Lines for pointing out this similarity to me. From this similarity, we should be able to more accurately predict the steps taken by the New World Order, and thus prepared to meet and overcome those steps in our churches. And guess what? Some of what we learned from 1800 BC is new material, stuff that I haven't read about before in the outline of the plan of a New World Order. But it makes sense, and I bet some of these steps are things they're going to do. So let's begin with the account of Pharaoh's famine. Pharaoh had a dream of 7 ugly cows eating 7 fat, healthy cows, and 7 lean ears of corn swallowing 7 good ears. You've probably heard of it. Pharaoh called for Joseph to interpret this crazy dream. As many know, God gave Joseph the interpretation that there would be 7 robust years of harvest, followed by a devastating 7-year famine. And if provisions were not put away for the lean years, the severe famine would ravage the land. Joseph recommended putting away 1/5 of each year's harvest as a provision for those lean years. This is exactly what this ministry has been preaching since 2014. We have recommended putting food aside for when it is needed in the famines of the end time. It now appears that famine may be almost upon us. Not only did we suggest that, but so did Jesus, which I bet is shocking to you. In this other popular video, Jesus tells a riddle, we explain why Jesus instructs us all to be preppers. The link is in the upper right corner of the screen if you haven't seen that one as well. Now, all these parallels with the past make me ask, were the years 2014 to 2021 a parallel 7 years of plenty, prior to an upcoming famine that may take place 2021 or 2 until 2028? That remains to be seen. But maybe they were. Now, returning to Joseph. Pharaoh placed Joseph in charge of collecting grain, and the abundance of grain from the 7 years of plenty was more than anyone could count, according to the Bible. The lives of many Egyptians were saved. The grain put away, however, didn't belong to the people. It belonged to the government. It was collected as a tax. This is the part of the tale that we don't hear too often in Sunday school stories. The lives of Egyptians were saved, but at an enormous cost. Now there was no food in all the land, because the famine was very severe, so that the land of Egypt and the land of Canaan languished because of the famine. And Joseph collected all the money that was found in the land of Egypt and in the land of Canaan in payment for the grain which they bought. And Joseph brought the money into Pharaoh's house. Joseph was Pharaoh's employee, so to speak, and as such, he protected Pharaoh's interests. Notice that the Egyptians spent all the cash money that they had on grain first. That is, until there was no money left. Next, after the cash was gone, Joseph took their livestock in trade for grain. Then Joseph said, "Give up your livestock, and I will give you food for your livestock, since your money is gone." In those days, livestock was their means of business. So second, Joseph acquired all the businesses and economic means of Egypt for the government. Then, when their businesses were gone, they sold their land and themselves as slaves. "Buy us and our land for food, and we and our land will be slaves of Pharaoh. So give us seed so that we may live and not die, and that the land may not be desolate." And isn't this the plan of the Great Reset? To acquire all assets of the nation's population and then put them all on a government payroll where the people will be little more than slaves of a totalitarian, communist-like government. Joseph then did something even more interesting. Something that I've never heard anyone else talk about. Something frightening that may lay in our future. As for the people, he relocated them to the cities from one end of Egypt's border to the other. This may be something that happens in the Great Reset, to relocate everyone away from their homes to cities where they can be monitored in apartments with smart technology and thus be controlled. Should we plan to be separated from our families and our friends and our churches and relocated into another part of the country, into apartments in a similar manner? Perhaps it will happen. It seems the kind of devious thing that these global elites might try. Also hidden in this account is what happened politically within Egypt. The account indicates that everyone sold their land to Pharaoh except the priests. This would include the 24 feudal lords who controlled the city-states of Egypt prior to the famine. So, prior to the historic Great Reset of Pharaoh's time, Pharaoh was more like a president with only limited power. After he bought and controlled all the land, though, he became a supreme totalitarian leader. Interesting how all the parallels, the Great Reset that the New World Order has planned, match with this previous historic account. how the Western democracies will move from democracies to totalitarian communist control upon their governments acquiring the nation's assets is exactly what happened in the past. It's also interesting that the Egyptian Great Reset was predicated on a natural disaster, a drought, that led to famine. And the Great Reset that we may be looking at in 2021 may be predicated on a virus that may lead to economic collapse and then also to famine. I don't know if you noticed, but Joseph, who obviously is a hero in the Bible and one of the very few Bible characters who has no sin recorded, is in some ways an unwitting accomplice of Pharaoh in this story. That might be a little harsh. Pharaoh was his master after all. But he does accomplish a plan that removes the assets of the common people and turns them into slaves of the government, creating a communist state of sorts back in ancient Egypt. So who is Joseph, symbolized in this modern retelling of Pharaoh's famine account, the Great Reset of 2021? Who is it that devises this plan and creates a worldwide communist government? You know, it's really hard for me to say. If you have any ideas, please let us know in the comments. How did the people of Israel fare during Egypt's Great Reset? Well, initially pretty good. Because of Joseph, they were provided for during his lifetime. And although the Israelites were safe during Joseph's life, things changed after his death. We read, "Now a new king arose over Egypt who did not know Joseph." I also find this very interesting. If you follow this channel, you are aware of another of our videos that examines how the world moves from the Great Reset to the Mark of the Beast and the Antichrist empire that will follow. Because the Western-based New World Order is not the Antichrist empire of the Bible, a new king has to arise. If you want to watch this older video to find out how, click the upper right corner of the screen to see that one. Now this second Pharaoh, in our opinion, represents the Antichrist, the one who takes over the New World Order and rules in their place. It is the second Pharaoh who enslaves the Israelites. Behold, the people of the sons of Israel are too many and too mighty for us. Come, let us deal shrewdly with them. Otherwise, they will multiply, and in the event of war, they will join with those who hate us and fight against us and depart from the land. So they appointed taskmasters over them to oppress them with hard labor, and they built for Pharaoh storage cities, Pithom and Ramses. Not only were the Israelites enslaved, but the new Pharaoh committed genocide against them. The Egyptians feared the Israelites, so they told the midwives, "When you are helping the Hebrew women to give birth, and see them upon their birth stool, if it is a son, you shall put him to death. But if it is a daughter, then she shall live." I think Christians should also expect genocide, not just of children, but adults also. Why? Because the new government will fear them. They will fear anyone who has a king higher than they are. All we have to do is look back in time to the rise of communist China and Russia. 61 million were killed in the Russian Revolution and up to 80 million at the hands of the communist Chinese. Those that oppose the revolution are the most expendable. They want a compliant workforce after all. And Christians who bow the knee only to God would be among the first to go. I find it amazing that young people in the West are anxious for a socialist state if they only knew the Bible or history. However, despite all the doom and gloom, God has planned a second Exodus to set his people free, with a Savior much greater than Moses, who set the Israelites free from Egypt. It will be Jesus himself, who will set us free from our captors. The Lord used Moses to reclaim his chosen people from the owning hand of Egypt's king. And in the same way, God will reclaim his chosen ones from the king of this earth's kingdom of darkness, the Antichrist. How does this second Exodus take place? Well, click right here to keep watching and learn how the events of the first Exodus will also repeat in the second Exodus. From the plagues to the trip to Mount Sinai to the return to Egypt, this is Nelson, and I will see you there.